the issue of migration is becoming a serious political crisis for Europe. And we need to show some empathy and join them to find a way to address the situation. One, because our people are involved. Two, because they are dying. Three, because they are giving the country bad publicity.
And that also raises the issue, it's a very important point you raised, because Europe right now is dealing with its own terrorism challenges.
True.
So is the United States. So it seems, that we'll get to that point where Europe will say it's time Africa took up the responsibility of dealing with its own challenges and allow us to face ours.
Don't forget that part of what led to the negative vote in Britain over quitting the European Union was the issue of migration. The German Chancellor has just lost election in his own constituency, and the anger also was spawned on by the issue of migration. You're right. It will get to a point in which some of these countries, particularly the political leadership, will begin to say that, look, if we are going to be losing power because of this issue, we need to address it squarely. But my contention is that we also need to work with them to stand the tide. It's going to be very difficult, but at least we should, because they are spending so much, particularly a country like Italy, they are spending so much. You could actually say in one way or the other that they created this crisis. Because when Gaddafi was in power, it was very difficult for some of these operations going on. There were some, but not as massive as it is today. So we need to work together to stand the tide, again, because so many Africans and non-Africans die trying to cross into Europe. Nigerians are involved. They're giving us bad publicity.
Do you think there's something Nigeria can do to stem this migration?
Not on its own, but we can work with the rest of the continent. We can also work with the Europeans. We need to find the route and see whether we can stop, the route through which this migration, There was a time that I think they tried to do that in Libya before the Libyan crisis, and it actually reduced the number of boats crossing from Libya to Europe. So working with the rest of the continent, I think we can.
Looking at this present administration, what credible feats do you think that they have achieved internationally this more than 1 year they've been in government?
Well, it depends on, you can't, look, the way I look at it is that they've just continued cautiously with the policy of the right or the last administration. At least we've not lost our friends. We strengthened position with some of our traditional friends in the sense that we seem to be working closely with the United States on the issue of security. And as I said, we are building strong economic relationship with the Chinese. But I would definitely love to see us articulate very clearly this whole concept of economic policy so that we can benefit, far more, not just on the issue of investors coming to Nigeria, but us creating a structure that will enable us to support Nigerian businesses that are going out into the continent. Because at the end of the day, these guys are the frontier to build that African trade and African cooperation that we've often spoken about.
And I remember one time you made mention of China doing that for some of its own
Oh yes, China assisted its companies to go out. The United States assisted its company to go out. The British assisted its company to go out. So we should be prepared to assist our companies to go out. And a couple of them, you know them very well, that are out there. We need to help them to establish themselves properly. And remember also that many years ago, and even till today, there are those who criticize our foreign policy, that we spent so much on country A, country B, and gained nothing. At that time, my argument has always been we do not have the capacity to gain much. But today, we are developing that capacity. And we should not lose sight of that. And so government must find a way of helping to strengthen that capacity and help those who are going into the continent.
And here's everything else we did not get to talk about happening in our world. Hungary is voting whether to accept mandatory EU quotas for relocating migrants. The quotas have been rejected by Prime Minister Viktor Orban, who does not want 160,000 migrants relocated to his country. Opinion poll already suggests the people could be behind him on this one, but the vote against the relocation can only pull through if it gets over 50% of votes. Hungary became a transit state on the Western Balkan route to Germany and other EU destinations during the migrant crisis. When it sealed off its border with Serbia and Croatia, the backlog of migrants was huge. Their action drew much criticism from human rights groups who spoke about many being left in the cold and having nowhere else to go. Meanwhile, in Syria, where many of the migrants have emerged, Syrian government forces and rebels have been fighting battles in the center of Aleppo, a week into a Russian-backed offensive by the Syrian army to take the entire area. Video distributed by the Syrian military showed what appeared to be close combat fighting in the area of Bustan al-Basha, a district north of the city center. Pro-Syrian government forces gained control over the Handarat camp on Thursday, according to a rebel official and war monitor. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights and a television station operated by Hezbollah said government forces had also taken the Kindi hospital area, adjacent to the Handarat Palestinian refugee camp, a few kilometers from the city on Friday. Rebel forces, however, denied there had been any additional advances north of the city by government forces. Back in Europe, hundreds gathered in the German capital Berlin to protest against the Syrian government offensive in Aleppo. Protesters said they wanted the UN and the German government to support the Syrian people who were fighting against the Assad government. The eastern rebel-held part of Aleppo remains under siege, with around 250,000 civilians trapped there. Hundreds of people, including dozens of children, have been reportedly killed since the onslaught began on September 22nd.
We are here today to say our word that people in Aleppo are suffering and they deserve all this solidarity. They deserve that, at least here as a Syrian community, because somehow we are just fitting up with the ignorance and silence of the world. So at least the Syrian community that we had the chance to leave Syria, at least we will need to tell our people that we did not forget and we will not.
A protest held in the Swiss city of Lausanne demanded the government do more to support migrants. A crowd of approximately 3,000 people gathered to protest against the so-called Dublin system for handling refugees in the first country where they registered, and urged the Swiss government to process applications for asylum in its own territory. According to the EU border agency Frontex, with the migrant crisis in its third year, a deal between the European Union and Turkey has reduced numbers of people crossing the sea to Greece, making Switzerland's neighbor Italy the new front line. In July, more than 25,000 migrants arrived in Italy, 12% more than last year. Despite that, Swiss asylum requests in June, July and August fell by more than a third last year, according to the Swiss State Secretariat for Migration. Some two-thirds of the nearly 7,500 migrants who reached Switzerland via the Italian border between July and early August were turned back. That's Diplomatic Channel this week. It's been great having you. If you don't mind, drop us a line on what makes Nigeria a great nation. The addresses are on your screen. I am Amarachi Ovani. I'll see you next time.